Welcome to the Amazing Truth Podcast, a podcast where we focus on real issues and have real talk, and as always, provide a biblical perspective. We hope that you will be blessed as you listen.
Hello and welcome to the Amazing Truth Podcast. This is the Amazing Truth Minute.
This is the Amazing Truth Podcast. The Amazing Truth Podcast. Listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and Stitcher. Like us on Facebook at the Amazing Truth Podcast. The Amazing Truth Podcast. Real issues, real talk.
For the Amazing Truth Minute, today we'll focus on the book of John, chapter 10 and verse 10. And it says, "The thief does not come except to steal and to kill and to destroy. I have come that they may have life and that they may have life more abundantly." I read again. It says, "The thief does not come except to steal and to kill and to destroy. I have come that they may have life and that they may have it more abundantly." You see, God has a good plan for every one of his children, but the enemy has a blueprint for our destruction. In the scriptures, one of the most well-known names for Jesus is the Good Shepherd. That's John 10, verse 11. Now, you see, in biblical times, the role of the shepherd was widely known, and it was a common knowledge that the sheep were more vulnerable animals who are prone to wander, stubborn, and in need of constant redirection from the shepherd in order to survive. Now, in the ancient Near East, it was typical for a shepherd to walk ahead of his sheep to make sure the predators wouldn't invade the flock. The shepherd protected and provided for his flock, sometimes even at the expense of his own life. In the same way, Jesus watches over us as a shepherd protects his sheep. Satan's desire is to inflict destruction, suffering, and loss, but Jesus came so we could have abundant life. And that is the Amazing Truth Minute.
The Amazing Truth Podcast. Real issues, real talk.
All right. There you go. Welcome back, Kenan.
Welcome, Ezra. Welcome.
It's good to be back.
You're long overdue for one, but yeah. Someone told me these weeks were too long, Ezra. I don't know what we're going to do.
They said 2 weeks are long?
The week, in between episodes, it's too much. we need to... So
listen, man, I feel their pain, but it's not the end of the world.
You can survive for a week.
Survive for a week, right? But on no seriousness, whoever will say that, shout out. We appreciate that. It's good for us to hear that, and I think sometimes it's good to keep it that way. People get used to it, and then it's like...
You wait. It's good to wait. When you wait, that means you're waiting for something good.
And also, it gives you time to process.
Yes,
it gives you time to process, to meditate, to reflect. Welcome back, listeners. Thank you for tuning in again for another episode. We are excited to pick it up again. As we said, this time around, this season, we want to get you all to think and think with us, because it's one thing to laugh and to talk about these things, but it's another thing when we come together and laugh. So the last 2 episodes we had Jude, right?
Yes, we had
Jude was here sharing his story. I mean, we are not done with Jude.
No, we are not done.
We're not done with Jude. And
as I was like we said, if we have to travel far to get him we have to bring him back.
Whoa. And I think listeners cannot understand why we say that, because listening to the podcast is high level, but I think when you start unpacking every angle of where Jude was coming from, it was very for those of us don't know in the context of the stories behind every aspect of that. I think there's a lot of gems, and that can be a whole season in itself. But that's for next time. Thank you for those who listened. I was just preambling that to say that you and I are the guest today.
Oh yeah. So no, don't wait. There's no drum roll for a guest.
No.
You're stuck with us.
But but we have to be intentional to let viewers or listeners why we're doing this. We decided that it's not every time where we want to bring a guest.
Yeah.
It is intentional. It's by design. It's not because that we don't want someone, but we want these. These are those moments where we pause and actually take a deep dive.
Yes.
We pause and reflect, and we pause and invite you to think with us, right?
Yeah.
So this is intentional because I know we are lining up. We've lined up some other good guests coming before the next deep dive again. But either the deep dive, whichever comes first. But we just want to let you know that this is intentional.
When we feel the need to deep dive, to process, we'll jump in and process, because these guests come here and they sit here for 45 minutes each episode.
Yep.
We don't get the whole story.
Reflections.
But when we talk to them backstage, there's a lot of things that come out of it. So we want to just take this time to go through it and deep dive and introspectively process those topics.
Exactly. So we want to dive into it, viewers. I mean, listeners, because you're used to it.
Ezra, viewers. What are you trying to say?
Listeners, because you're used to it. Our guest today is Kenan.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And thank you for coming, Kenan.
And our guest today is Ezra.
And thank you for having me. All right, there you have it. Our topic today is one that is heavy. It's one that is heavy. We want to reflect on heavy, and I don't think we'll ever, even if we chose to take the entire time, really understand. I want to talk about transitions. We want to talk about transition, Kenan. They say that when someone goes through a very catastrophic experience in life, it actually it shapes. And sometimes when you think about they go to a process of grieving. Right?
Yeah.
And when you think about grieving, the thought is always that when someone has died, right? But it doesn't necessarily have to be when someone dies, right? What are some other examples that people can grieve through?
You can grieve through a loss of a job.
You can
grieve through a loss of a friendship. Loss of a marriage.
Exactly.
Different things.
So and I think it's
loss of like Arsenal.
This podcast is gonna end. We will not keep up at this rate.
That's for example.
Okay. But that's not a good example of what you do to someone who's grieving. But anyways, having said that, like, people think that they grieve only when they lose their loved ones. People think that they grieve when they lose they bury or cremate someone. But I think our listeners, someone has lost a job. Or a young person has missed a chance to their favorite college that they intended to go. Or you've lost a friendship. The question is, how do you go through that process? And how do you unpack that? Because, man, if that hits you from all angles, then it becomes even harder.
And Ezra, any type of loss that someone goes through, however long, whatever length that relationship was, it is still a loss. And it's important because it shaped experiences, and you've exchanged emotions. So it means a lot. Whether it's small, look at it small, a loss is still a loss,
I think yes. I was gonna say something, but let's stick to this.
Yes.
Having said that, so our listeners, you've lost something. You've gone through a crisis in your life. But there's one thing that we've been hearing through this podcast and that I want to reflect on is, I don't think if it's a loss or it comes with a loss, but it's a transition, like the major transitions in life, which, result to majority of our listeners either to be immigrants in a foreign country, and how that transition just affects someone's, life. Because when you think about, we can go back to Izo, they're trying to fit in coming, Victor, when you can come back to Jude last week, just talking about just moving from Haiti and just how that had a big impact on him and how who he ended up becoming in the US. And so if these major transitions, is it possible, Kenan, for them to lead to trauma?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because go ahead. I don't know if that was a question or
that was a question. Like, is it possible for you to lead to trauma? And if so, how so? What comes to mind when you think about that?
Because I think, and this is we are firsthand because we are both immigrants.
Yes.
And I think I wanted to say something before you go to the immigrant perspective. Is any transition, if you're transitioning from a job, you're transitioning from a new house, changing schools, that in itself destabilizes someone. But now on the focus of being an immigrant, I think, being an immigrant, you're used to a certain environment. You're used to a certain way of life. You know, definitely it's not the same coming from Haiti or coming from Kenya or coming from wherever, coming to this country, especially, or wherever you go. It's not going to be the same.
Yes.
So you go through a process of acclimatizing yourself to the food, the weather, and that if you
the people,
the language,
the culture.
If it's not handled well, it could cause trauma.
Do you think, Kenan, from the stories we've been hearing that, you know, and I'm going to just call it, I'm going to say that a lot of our guests and a lot of people who have come and a lot of, you know, cases that you and I have been called to in the community to handle, there is a tad bit of trauma embedded in that. Do you think these transitions contribute towards those trauma?
Definitely, Ezra. Because now look at a child. Let's give an example of a child who's coming from somewhere in Africa, you know, and then they come here, they are thrown into school, and from those the episodes you've had, you know, they've all this. The trauma starts from maybe school, the common ones you've seen. Now you go to school, you have to learn the language, you have to sit through class, you have a different way of dressing, you have a different way of how you look, you know, it's different. So it causes trauma. And then building on that trauma that a child faces, someone faces, these things from what we've had in the episodes, they're not addressed.
Yes.
They're not, you know, unpacked.
Yes.
And then later in life, you know, there's you see substance abuse, you come to see the depression, the mental health. So it channels down to it and it becomes traumatic.
So some of these things, first of all, you know, you're using a very big word. I like when I talk to you in this language, I feel more educated. But what is trauma actually? Like in the simple terms, like how, because someone is thinking and saying, "Man, I've never gone through trauma. I'm not traumatic." You know, I had a simplest definition that I had. I don't know which one you have. Your professional.
I think we should just be simple.
Let's keep it simple.
Just keep it simple.
Come to my level, not to your level as a social worker. I think the definition that I had is trauma is a deep emotional wound.
Yeah,
like simple. So, I mean, let's just, have you ever, like for you in your life, like what is like a deep emotional wound, like someone you've had?
Yeah, Ezra, and I think I can say this because it was in the podcast.
Yes.
When we lost our child,
yes,
that was a traumatic experience.
Exactly.
Right? So the deep emotional wound or a disturbance, according to my definition, was a disturbing experience.
Okay.
So that in itself,
a disturbing experience. I like that.
It's a disturbing experience, and then you mentioned it's an emotional wound.
It's an emotion.
So trauma, that's important because you can't see trauma. You know, it's not like it's an eye injury, or it could be physical injury.
You can go for physical checkup.
No, I mean it could be. I mean trauma could lead to physical injury.
Yes,
but the one we're trying to focus here is that there's some trauma that you can't see. Unless someone tells you I went through something, you can't really know that they've gone through trauma. And
there can be trauma that has been normalized.
Yes.
It looks like it's normal, but it's not normal.
The first experience was traumatic, but then over the edge,
it's like this is a way of life.
Right,
this is how we live. Right.
Yeah.
So trauma is a disturbing. What was the definition?
A disturbing experience.
A disturbing experience, and I'm sure listeners, you've gone through a disturbing experience. Like something that really disturbed you, something that bothered you, or a deep emotional wound that you're still healing. And so listeners, if you can pause and think, what are some of the disturbing experiences in your life that you've gone through? Like it might not bother you now, but if you go back and reflect on your many years, you know, back 70 years, 30 years, 10 years of your life.
And whether you've handled them or not.
Whether you've handled them.
Yeah.
Like, can you write them down on a piece of paper and say, what are these disturbing experiences that I have gone through? And how did I deal with them?
Yeah.
What steps did I take to handle them? You know, because it's important. It is important because if you don't do that, then we have the story of Jude, because you have to create a way of coping with it, and sometimes it's not a healthy way of coping with it.
So let me ask you though, if eventually, I know if I'm jumping the gun here, but if someone has dealt with it, do these experiences still linger? Do you think they still linger in their life?
I think they do. I'm not an expert in this. I think they do. I think that not necessarily they do, but I think you have resources to handle them better when they come. So you might be able to recognize that's the trauma, so I need to do this. That's the experience I went, so I need to do that. Why is this thing disturbing me?
Yeah.
Okay, so you can be able to recognize that this thing is just disturbing me because it's traumatized me.
Right.
So now that I know it's traumatized me, now how can I handle it? Because in life, stress will be there. Like transitions, you might end up transitioning again, you know, where you are right now, things don't work out. You know, you happily ever after you get a spouse and you decide to move, but the transition is rough.
Still rough,
you know. So, but you will know that last time I did this didn't go well.
No,
this is what I did.
Right.
Now I can change. So you handle and you cope with it much better. Let me, Kenan, let me contextualize this.
Right.
I have interacted with a lot of young people, first generation, second generation immigrants, who sometimes it feels as though the blame is on the parents of how they've either handled. So Dr. Karen, our good friend,
Whoop, whoop, Dr. Karen.
Dr. Karen, you know, and by the way, Dr. Karen is a good friend of ours. She's a psychiatrist, and you know, we work with her in this situation. Someone that we refer people to, and it's been just an amazing support system for most of and a good number of people that we have actually worked with her there. So anyway, Dr. Karen we were in one session with, not a session, but we were in she was conducting a conference or something like that. And she asked this question. She said to the young people, there were young people and there were parents there. So the question she posed to the parents, to the group was, to the young people, do you think your parents love you? And the response rate, 100% of the survey was yes. Then she posed the same question to the parents, do you think your children love you? And the parents responded 100% yes. Then she followed up with a question and said, do you think your parents understand you? The results dramatically dropped. The young people said, well, we believe our parents love us, but we don't think they understand us.
Wow.
And the parents also says, we think our young people will love us, but we don't understand them. We don't understand them. And she said, that is where the misfit and the mismatch comes in. And out of that discussion, and I'm using this example to usher in to say that if that understanding is not bridged, it creates a space to bridge trauma.
Yeah.
Right? You both love each other. You love your parents to death. You love your children to death. But you cannot stay in the same room for even 10 minutes without fighting.
Yeah. And I think Ezra, it's safe to say that not only for the kids that are born here.
Yeah.
Even I think going back to kids that are, if you're born and then brought here.
Yes.
I think it's the same concept.
It's the same concept.
There's a disconnect between how children relate to their parents. You know, and now why? That's the $1 million question.
That's the $1 million.
And how do we bridge that gap? How do we bridge it? And again, we're not experts.
No,
we're just here.
We're just reflecting.
We're deep diving.
Yeah, we're deep diving and reflecting. So if you have answers and you think why, shoot us an email. We will be keen to spare maybe the first 5 minutes next time to say some of the things along those lines. Yeah. But I think it's a question that I want you to think about. You know, do you love your parents? Do you love your children? Do you love your spouse? Do you love each other? And if you can say confidently yes, then the question is, do you think you both understand each other? Because if there are areas you feel like you don't understand each other, if not addressed, it can create and breed room for trauma actually to do what? To grow. So one of the misunderstanding that I have had is that, you know, parents provide resources, roof, food, and everything, but not emotional. You know, not emotional touch. You know, that is one of the things. Our parents work so hard and they're never home to be with us. So what could be the misunderstanding?
But the parent will say, I'm trying to provide for you.
Exactly. I'm trying to provide. So both of them, are they doing something wrong? No, they're not doing anything wrong. The parents feels their responsibility to provide. And it's their role to do that. And they have to, because there's an immigrant parent. Probably one salary does not make it.
Right.
Maybe, you know, Africans, we don't settle for 2 kids. You go with 4, 5, 6. So your apartment, 2-bedroom apartment cannot meet that. You need to buy a building, you know, a house. You know, so you have to work extra hard. And in doing so that you can provide, the kids feel like, I don't have time with my parents. I don't see them. And the parents want to provide that house so that you can all be comfortable. So the kids feel neglected, and the parent feels like these kids don't understand that I'm working so hard to provide for them.
And for that parent, Ezra, when they provide that phone or that house, they know they've done everything.
Exactly.
So if you sit down with the parent and say, okay, you're not doing, I say, no, but I have bought a big house. I have bought them a phone, So that's, and then the conversation kind of ends there.
Yes.
Because now, what else do you want? And I've had parents say that, what else do you want? I've given you this, I've given you that. And then I should ask kids now, what else do you want?
Yes.
Has the initial need been met? Probably not.
Yes. So the need probably was not the phone.
Exactly.
The need was an emotional need.
Yes.
But it was met in form of a phone.
And the parent thinks that they fulfilled that need.
And the kid maybe doesn't understand that. Me, I shouldn't be speaking because I don't have children.
No. But
but just from just experiences, like really, Kenan, this is a huge problem right now in our community. It's a very huge problem. So you and I, we spend time and hours just trying to understand where this generation versus that generation is coming from. And clearly that is a big trigger for the traumas that are currently in the society.
Yeah.
So listeners, as you're listening to us, as you listen to this, what are some of the misunderstandings? Because we need to identify those misunderstandings so that we can be able to say, okay, how do we address them? Let's go back to reflect to our friend Rehema.
Yeah.
I lost my train of thought, but in the story of Rehema, she highlights a story. She shares with us. She was bold enough to share with us and say that she thought that the parents didn't understand or love her.
Yeah.
But later on, as she grew up, she realized that how hard it was for them to even work because they couldn't speak the English, and how people looked down. So you can imagine this father and mother who's dealing with the trauma at work, or let me not even actually use Rehema's story. Let me use my story. When we moved to this country, we got a job, my father and I, and we were working both at White Castle. First of all, you're working at White Castle. No, I'm thinking my father, you came from a place where he was working in the government, and then you went White Castle. Just what that does to the ego of a man.
Yeah.
And we're there working together, flipping burgers. For me, it felt wrong. It wasn't comfortable just to see that. I couldn't rationalize and reconcile that. But what really used to hurt me most is when people could not understand my father. Like when someone makes an order. And you can see and listen and struggle through that. And we're there working together. Like just seeing him trying to do everything he can to provide. And me standing behind the man who's supposed to be the man.
Yeah.
The father. Like, now that I'm looking back, that disturbed me. I never saw it as trauma. Like, I don't even know if I can call it trauma, but it disturbed me.
It's a disturbing experience.
It was a disturbing experience, both for him, and I'm sure it disturbed him.
Yeah.
And for me, like in that state. Now, then I get home, I'm like, Dad, I need money for X.
Right.
Because he's still the father.
Now think about what it did to him.
Yeah.
Now you've painted a good picture. I'm not saying White Castle is not a good job, but compared to what he probably did, and coming here now, you've brought about the transition you were talking about.
Yeah.
There's a language barrier.
Yes.
There's the occupation barrier. And now you are here with him as his eldest son. And he probably wants to show you how to
be a man.
To be a man.
Yeah.
But then there's this other angle of him being, people can be mean. It's not, and you see that now, that to him as a father, he's probably thinking, what am I doing? I'm being a failure.
Why did I come to this country?
Why did I come here to be humiliated?
But then you see, do the kids at home understand that?
No.
Do they see that? Do we see that story in the front lines?
What we see is a dad who's come from White Castle and brought a new iPhone 11.
Exactly, right? But then, genuinely so, but also what the child wants is you to take some time off.
Yeah.
And let's just sit at home. We don't even have to do anything. And they might not even know that.
Yeah.
They might not even say that.
And Ezra, let me ask you a question though. Now that you mentioned that, did you ask your dad how he's doing at that time?
Nah, man.
Exactly.
This is the first time I'm talking about
exactly.
this experience.
So yeah, I mean,
I don't even know if I have consent for him to have this conversation. I might have to.
Your dad. We'll
square it at home,
Dad
right?
will bring a release
for you to satisfy at home, right? Okay.
But what I'm saying is, Ezra, what hypothetically speaking, because you didn't ask him that, what do you think it would have made? What difference would it have made if you just asked him, Dad, how are you doing? Or if I would just tell him, Dad, it's okay, I understand. I mean, at that age, you probably couldn't.
Myself, I didn't even know what was going on.
What I'm saying is, you didn't ask because you didn't know.
Yes.
And he didn't expect you to ask. But now that's why we are seated here to say that, kids, you need to ask your parents, how are you doing?
How was your day?
How was your day?
You know,
because then if you asked him that, he probably would have vented and said, my son.
Yes.
It's like, let me look, I'm just, it opens up something for him to share.
It's not only parents who should carry that burden.
Yeah.
It is younger people.
Yes.
Also, we have a responsibility to say,
just ask.
Genuinely ask. Make your parents feel loved, appreciated, even though you might not understand.
Yeah.
But be intentional about that. And also parents, when you realize something disturbing you, now I'm going to introduce another educational term. Please.
Let's see. But
the educational term, the word I want to introduce is called epigenetics.
Hey,
we came to reflect.
You didn't warn me with that. You didn't warn me.
It's called, it's a term that means how experiences of previous generations can affect who we are today.
Right.
Like the experience that my father went through can affect me because that's what he's going to hand down.
Yeah.
Right. So the term is it's epigenetics. It's you might ask what it is, but I was looking at this and it says like I'm reading now. Now that's where my capacity ended. Now I'll have to read online. Epigenetics. Epigenetics. It tells us about how certain lifestyle factors such as diet, stress, and exercise can change the way your genes are expressed. So the extreme stress that you're going through because of transition, the extreme stress you're going through because you're trying to provide for your family, the extreme stress that you're going through because you don't understand your parents and vice versa. This it tells science shows that over a period of time under that stressful experience, it can affect your genes. So genetically, and we know these things are handed down genetically because we adopt these things from genetics. It's interestingly that these changes appear to affect things like your health and disease and general well-being. So you can imagine what that does.
So Ezra, so what you're saying is, if I'm a parent and I'm stressed, all right, and then maybe this stress leads to hypertension, or obesity, or heart disease,
or diabetes.
So it has affected my genes. So because I didn't deal with that stress, and it has caused these health factors. It potentially, genetically, my child will have the same health risks.
So will be susceptible to a higher risk of that.
Wow.
You know why? Because I didn't deal with that disturbing situation that I was in, an experience that I was in.
Mind you, it's not physical at that point.
No, it's emotional.
It's emotional. So then it leads to serious physical illness. Wow.
So there's this notion that toughen up.
Right.
There's this notion of saying, man up. There's this notion that be a man,
Yeah. And Ezra, man, because not just health, diabetes, even things like mental health, anxiety, depression, can be passed down to
generations.
Wow.
So we're talking about some serious stuff. We laugh about certain things that happened to us. We listen to these stories of the guests who have come here. We ourselves, have situations that maybe happened 20 years ago and they're disturbing you because you've never dealt with them. You might be in a state where you think that you're okay because you have a good job. You're okay because you have a good, car, you've bought a house, you're smiling, everybody likes your photos on social media, but there's something disturbing you.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
That is traumatic. That's trauma.
Exactly.
And when it continues for a prolonged period of time, now it can affect your genetics.
Mm-hmm.
And once it affects your genetics, it can be handed down to the next generation. Kenan,
Wow.
I think we need to pause and we need a reflection from the reflection.
This is powerful. You say deep, but this is But wow, and that what comes to my mind also is we were listening to Rehema speak the other time. We were talking about how she talked about her parents, and we I think we mentioned in that podcast that there was a genocide.
Yes,
and they probably would have witnessed.
She moved several countries.
Exactly.
As a refugee.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So now the trauma that they carried, and they probably not dealt with it. I'm just not. This is that's Rehema. This is
not Rehema stories. We're just reflecting.
Like
let's not even use. Let's say that someone who has gone through a war-torn experience,
right? Being in a war zone.
Yeah.
The kids that presently
Afghanistan
Haiti,
right now.
What's going on? So that trauma, the historical trauma that goes through that, the kids that witnessed it, or the parents that are carrying it, it passed down.
There you have it.
Wow.
So you then you love each other as a family, but you don't understand each other. Because everyone is trying to deal with this trauma. The parent the parent in Afghanistan right now is dealing with that trauma. Their child who's witnessing it right now is going to deal with it. They might get asylum in another country. That's the transition itself will be heavy for them. They get into that country. They try to settle in. Maybe English is a barrier. It becomes. Then the child, it's just so much. And what we have to understand as human beings is that we have been built to be resilient, but there are so many things that are thrown at us. And we have to accept that those things are not easy and lighter things that are thrown at us.
Ezra. Wow. Let me ask you something. You've heard of the term the American dream.
I have. I'm still dreaming about it.
Right. But what's that? And what do you think that has done to us immigrants?
Yes.
And what it has done to families?
I think it's destroyed us.
Right.
Because first of all, the American dream, I'm not American. Mm-hmm. Well, I am by naturalization.
Right.
But culturally, my way of life, my being, I am not fully American. I am some tendencies of me. So it begins, that concept of itself just does something to do with identity, like the American dream. What about the human dream?
Yeah.
Just the human dream. I just want to be a normal human being. So you might have pressure for yourself to achieve a dream that has been defined that you don't even know what that dream is.
Yeah.
Right? So I think that has made people to try to attain certain things depending on how they define that American dream. But then the question is that even their dream?
Is that their dream?
Yeah. What's your dream yourself?
And what I know is the American dream is always tied to employment.
Capitalist.
So capitalist, and so if we as black people, if we are out of a job, we are losing the American dream. So we are forced to keep a job, whether you like it or not. Because you're chasing the American dream. But what I'm trying to say is that employment, now if you have to put the American dream in perspective and we can get away, we can do away with it.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you just have to have employment, because if you lose that job, you're stressed.
Yes.
Because you're trying to, there's other ways you can define the American dream and achieve it.
Yes.
If that's what you're going for.
Yes. Actually, I like what you're saying is even the concept of employment. There are people who are working in very toxic jobs.
Yeah.
That the paycheck is not worth it.
Right.
Like the stress that you're bringing home, it's more than the paycheck that you brought home.
Right.
It has long-term effects. So just being able to do that, I think what I'll take from Kenan, the question you asked is, how do we set our goals, our priorities, me as Ezra, you as Kenan, rather than saying this is the dream that society wants me to have. Like, this is the dream. How? Let's get back to trauma. Let's get back to trauma. Yeah. And we're going to start winding up, because these reflections are just not an hour long. You know? But you know, again, see, I did some research on this.
Yeah. Right? I see. What are you going to throw at us again, Ezra? Go ahead.
Dr. L. Cutty says historical trauma. It talks about history. They say that history is not about the past. It is about the present. I want to pause and reflect that.
Let me...
History is not about the past. It's about the present. What do you think? What do you think the statement means?
Can I go for break?
We can take a break. We can take a break.
History is not about the past.
Yes.
It's about the present.
Yes.
So what I can chew this is that, you know, it's not for me to dwell in the past. Because whatever I went through in the past has, in a way, shaped who I am. It has brought me to be a different person or not. But I shouldn't dwell there and sit there. I should focus on the present.
Okay. What I can do now.
What I can do now instead of
what happened
in the past.
I like that.
And not discounting what happened in the past, because in a way it has shaped who you are today.
But you have the opportunity today to change
basing on the lessons of the past. But dwell in the present. See, you know, and parents again. Let's go back to parents now. I've had parents say that, even my own parents, I've had them say that, you know, I was. Now I
used to walk without shoes.
Yes, I want you to. I used to do this. Yeah. But that's the past.
Yes.
The present is whatever you have right now.
What environment are you right now? What opportunities are there?
Because granted, what happened in the 60s cannot happen now. It's totally different.
Principally,
right.
But the how,
yes,
things have changed. Right? So expecting someone to live how you lived in the past, of how we did things in the past,
or how you handle
stress or situations in the past,
different.
It's different.
It's different.
See, you're deep, man. I didn't think about it.
So we should not. I don't want to say use the word expect. We should at least allow your kids or allow your family, let's say family, to kind of maneuver these ways that the present, whatever it is in the present.
Yes.
Because if you ran 10 miles to deal with your stress,
yes,
or you are using cows to farm,
yes,
that's not how your child is going to face the stress today.
But the principle could be that in the process of doing that work and doing this, you're able to handle that. So what is it that in the present that resources that your child can do rather than sit at home and close themselves in a room,
yes,
that can help them, you know, engage with the distress that they're having right now.
Yes, and additionally, parents should understand what those things are.
But even them, they didn't understand them. So I think
right.
You know,
we're at the age we are right now. You cannot be ignorant and say you cannot learn those things.
I think you know, I want to be fair and say we just need to have an open mind,
right?
Because I think also, again, we talked about even the parents are going through the trauma too.
Exactly. Yeah.
So they themselves are dealing with their own. You know, their own issues. You are the firstborn. When you finished school, you had to pay for your siblings and for college, and you had to work hard. If you didn't have that money, then you had your own. You have to start a family. You start a family. You have to get kids, and you know. But still, all this is being added to. Nothing is being taken away. So you've dealt with all that all your life. So there are things that will manifest. Going back to that statement, for me, history is not about the past. It's about the present. I also think about what he says is that principally agreeing with you, how you handle the present today is what will determine, how do I say this? I think I'm lost. History is not about the past. It's about the present. I think yours beat mine. That concept was, I think you lost me in that conversation. I had a thought that I had before, but I've lost my train of thought. Yeah. So historical trauma, realizing that we have things from the past, but we need to live in the present.
It's important because because you don't know how living in the past, what new stress or new trauma it's going to bring
right now.
So
I mean, from today we're just reflecting on this concept of you know, historical, you know, not historical, but trauma in general. Experiences that distress us. And as a listener who's listening to us, we want to ask you a question. We want to ask you to think about some of the adverse childhood experiences that you went through.
Ezra, that is a whole new session. Maybe I think we should do that in the next one, because that in itself is what shapes a child and how they're going to grow. It's mostly centered around the adverse childhood experiences. So I think that's deep. That's deep in itself. And I want to do it justice by giving it the time it deserves.
Yes.
But yeah, so final thoughts, as it's 40 minutes. We wanted to stay under 40 minutes, but we kind of got carried away. But I think it's needed, Ezra. We need to critically think about ourselves, our society, and the kids we are raising and the parents that are raising those kids.
I think being honest. Yeah. For me, my parting shot is just being honest to yourself.
Right.
Having moments to pull back and reflect. What is this disturbing me?
Right.
When you feel something disturbing you. Don't just feel like, oh, how do I cope with it? When I cope with it, I go to the gym, I go run, but you're not really addressing what is this thing? What is the root of this thing? Why am I feeling my parents are buying me this, they're providing me this, they love me? Why am I still feeling like they don't understand me?
Yeah.
Is it how I speak? Is it how I express myself? Is it how, vice versa? Parents, I have provided, I have done. Let me even just spouses, man. Those of us who are married, I'm married, It's tough, because in a relationship, there's someone who knows you, who sees you, who lives with you, who can call you out anytime, and they're rightly so, because they see it all. But if we find ourselves in our relationship, they're constantly toxic, pausing and asking, like, why do I have a toxic relationship? What is this that is causing that toxicity and the extended distress, and how is that affecting me? You don't want to be driving from work and you get to the parking lot to just sit in the car for a while, because you're revering getting into that house, because that is an expression that there's a deeper problem that needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
So my parting shot is really like, there's a lasting consequence to this that can be handed down generations, and epigenetics is a real thing. It can affect our physical health from our emotional distress that we face and we go through. So, hey guys, take care of yourselves, do the physical checkup. We're still working on that. But on top of that, doing all that, ensure that you're true to yourself. Right. Be true to yourself. Yeah. Be true to yourself. Don't live in the past, but use the past experiences to shape who you become and be a better person in the future.
I'll just continue with what you're saying, is that I think once you've understood and you've gone through that, you've introspectively looked at yourself, I think allow yourself to be vulnerable. We use that term, but it's very important, Ezra. Yes. I think we need to allow ourselves to be vulnerable to know and understand the trauma that you've gone through, and willing to share that experience and work from it. So I think knowing that we can be vulnerable and we can seek help. And I think in the next episode, we probably will give listeners, the practical. Now, we said parents don't understand each other, the children understand the parents. Now, what's the process of understanding each other?
As we close, it's so easy to talk about other people and stuff. So I'm going to part on this shot. We're going to part it on this shot. Yeah. As vulnerable as you can be, what is an experience that yes. Because we're talking about reflecting.
The Amazing Truth podcast.
I think it's important for us to share that, you don't have to share the most vulnerable one, but one thing that that probably exactly that you are the guest today, right? you gladly accepted that.
No, I mean, I won't. I think there's okay. I'll share moments of vulnerability that I've had. I think I'll put it back to where let me say counseling, like marriage counseling. Those are moments of vulnerability for me, because I wanted this person that I'm getting married to understand who I am. So those moments were very vulnerable for me. Another one that I think because it's already out there, it's when you were talking about the trauma we went through. I think that difficult, but I know I had to get to that point of vulnerability. I just kept it simple.
That one, you kept it simple. I think something that
let me ask you, Ezra. Now, what is your most vulnerable moment?
I wouldn't say most,
Okay.
but I say
give us an example of a vulnerable moment.
I think a vulnerable moment for me is I think vulnerable moment for me was to accept that I needed to actually see a counselor. I mean, growing up where I knew that, and probably actually I don't think even family be like, you see one, you've seen one, but I think that and I'm not talking about counselor before marriage.
Right.
I'm talking about like after going the health challenges that my spouse, my wife has gone through and stuff, I realized caregiver burnout is real. But at first I didn't know what it was that was just hitting me left, right. So I found myself being irritable, found myself being annoyed, found myself just being rude, and said, you need, something is off. Something is off. What's going on? And it was hard for me. But getting to that space and place to say, you know what? You're right. I need to actually pause and step in and see if there's that was humbling for me. So acknowledging that something is disturbing me, but now I look back and realize it's a burnout. It was the burnout of just caregiver, but I'm in a good space when it comes. I know what it does. I know how to handle that and all those things. I can do better, but it's been that
and I can feel it is that even speaking about that's a moment of vulnerability for you.
It is even here, just
and thank you for sharing. They say from coming from a therapist, I mean that's brave of you to admit that. As an African, that is strong and brave for you to admit that.
We gotta start changing, saying that
change the
vulnerability is should be the greatest strength of humanity.
Yeah.
Because many times it's not a weakness. No. Being vulnerable to the right space and the right place is a strength. There you have it, listeners. Kenan put me uncomfortable a little bit. I did vice versa, but we're just gonna be honest, be real. We want to reflect and talk about these issues. If you have any thoughts, ideas, be sure to like, subscribe, and send us a message so that we can be able to reflect on those thoughts too as we build on these reflection moments in this season.
Exactly. And as I wanted to say that it's not if you want to come to the podcast, reach out to us. We may not know who you are. Just reach out to us and we'll bring. So that brings us to the end of this episode of the Amazing Truth Podcast.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Amazing Truth Podcast. We hope you were blessed as you listened. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. God bless you, and see you on the next one.